rounded featherweights meeting up in Jacksonville. Coming up this weekend, you have Phar Jenkins, and he's going to look to go 2-0 in America, taking on the former LFA staple. It is pretty boy Jamall Emmers. And Matt, when you do consider both these fighters, Jenkins on such an impressive win streak. He was so dominant over with Eternal when he was fighting there. Gets a win on Contender Series, gets that UFC debut win at home. His last time out against, what's out of my hands? I'm shameless, Don Shainis, and in that one, Jenkins was really able to stifle any offense out of Shainis, utilizing really good boxing combos. We know how good the leg kick is of Jenkins. I mean, if you do consider it, just a few fights ago, right before Contender Series, when he was taking on Jason Petropoulos, he breaks his leg with a leg kick, so that was awesome to see, or disgusting to see. It depends on how you view MMA and leg kicks, but if you look at it for Jenkins, it really is a lot of bobbing and weaving and throwing those combos, picking in his body shots and working in his wrestling. We saw a lot of takedowns when Jenkins was on Dana White's Contender Series, to the fact where Dana was really critical of it, and it didn't make a ton of sense to me. But Jenkins' last time out against Shainis looked amazing. Now, all of those skills being transferable against a guy like Jamall Emmers, it might be a little difficult because Emmers has exceptional takedown defense. He's been favored in all of his UFC fights except for his last fight against Kushain Ashkabov, who looked more like a pretender than a guy to remember.
Isn't it kind of wild, though, for Jamall Emmers? You got to go back just a short little while ago. He fought a pretty close fight with Giga Chikadze.
On super short notice.
It's like, remember when Josh Smith hit all those threes when he played for the Houston Rockets? It was just that little blip. Not a lot of people are going to remember that. It was against the Clippers in the playoffs.
That's because he was a Detroit Pistons staple, Josh Smith.
He was an Atlanta Hawks staple is what I remember him for. He threw down thunderous dunks with them. But for Jamall Emmers, he has had some really nice performances on his record. But what I will say is, and you bring up to see if the skills of Jenkins are transferable, I think that bob and weave style will be quite effective against Emmers for this reason. Emmers is a guy who's going to loop a lot of his bigger power shots, and if Jenkins is able to get underneath some of those, I do think he will be able to counter. But this is what's going to be really important. Jenkins can offensively wrestle, but I do think Emmers is going to have a bit of an edge with his own wrestling in this matchup. If Emmers can make Jenkins uncomfortable on the inside when he is trying to engage his own leg kick and boxing combinations, I could see him having a lot of success because Jenkins, when he's not going to the body, he will get a little happy with his hands throwing his combinations to the head, and I could see Emmers shooting underneath and getting some offensive takedowns that way. But I really do think the offensive wrestling of Emmers is going to play a big factor in this fight, because not that I think Jenkins is going to win every moment on the feet whatsoever. I just think his striking on the inside is going to make Emmers a little bit more uncomfortable, and I do think he can force out some shots from Emmers.
Well, and that's the interesting thing when you look at both these guys. Jenkins, absolute MMA conditioning down in Australia, and he's had a big supporter in Jimmy Crute for a long time, being in the UFC, kind of shouting, chanting that horse nickname, because that's what Jenkins is nicknamed after, a horse, a racing horse in Australia. If you look at it for Jamall Emmers, again, the level of competition far outweighs that of Jenkins. Wins over Corey Sandhagen, Alexander Hernandez, and he also has a win over Nate Diaz protege Chris Avila. Couldn't get it done in the UFC or the Ultimate Fighter or Bellator or a lot of spots. But he did have some hype at one point. If you look at it for Emmers, he's defended all 9 takedown attempts that everybody's thrown at him in the UFC. But again, we have seen him lose to Giga Chikadze. We saw that Marge Simpson, Mike Tyson punch-out uppercut against Pat Sabatini, where Emmers follows Sabatini down to the mat. He gets in a mount. Then he gets the back with the hooks in and looks like he's going to get the rear naked choke. Sabatini ending up with that heel hook, destroying the left knee of Jamall Emmers, putting him out of commission for almost 2 years. But Emmers, his last time out against Ashkabov, fought a somewhat tentative fight because he was reserved. He threw out 36 leg kicks. He landed on 17 of them, but that was a big difference maker for Emmers against an all-action Ashkabov, whose gas tank evaded him as that fight went on. So I think this is going to be a fun one. For Jenkins, it's don't get hit, get out of the way. And he is really one of those guys. Like I said, bob and weave. He's able to get in and out of range really quickly. He has a really tight, compact type of style that can carry him really far in this division. Phar being the nickname, it's kind of a surprise too, because Jenkins already 30 years old. Doesn't really seem like it.
And that's why he's kind of going to get active right now, and that's why I like this matchup against Jamall Emmers. Jamall Emmers, in just a regular MMA fan's mind, might not hold a lot of stock, but if you beat a guy like Emmers, I think you do move up the division quite a bit. He's a very well-rounded fighter, like we've laid out. He is a very dangerous fighter in multiple different facets of the game. For Jenkins, if you're that 30-year-old prospect, it is time to kind of get moving, you know? You don't have a ton of time.
And the craziest part for Jenkins, he is 1-1 in his career against funky cold Jesse Medina. Man, do you think he's a big Tone Lock fan?
He could be.
He has to be. And the other loss is Sang-Won Kim, who just got a big win in the semifinals of the Road to UFC tournament that just happened. So Jenkins, level competition coming on to Dana White's Contender Series, combined opponent record 26-23-1. But he definitely showed out his last 2 fights and then some that he belongs at this stage. I mean, for Jamall Emmers, he's actually favored once more in this matchup ever so slightly. We have a look at the Tapology votes, Matt. Surprise to us there to you. To go back to Emmers' last fight against Ashkabov, 3,600 total votes or thereabouts, 86% Ashkabov. I don't think the script's going to be flipped. I'm going to say over under 67.5% Jenkins in this one.
I think it'll be under. I think Emmers will be the favorite.
I think Emmers is going to be favored. Wow. I swear to God, I didn't look at these. 529 total votes, 68% Jenkins, 79% by decision. For the 32% that have Emmers, 85% by decision. And the thing that I disagree with a little bit here, Emmers is one of those guys that kind of pick and pop with his shots, throws power when he needs to. He has nice knees up the middle, nice shots up the middle. You saw that against Sabatini. You saw that on the way up into the UFC. And Emmers, I mean, he's fought a really high level competition. He's also lost to a really high level competition. He himself, Erosa, he lost. He dropped him in the first round, and then he ends up getting finished the head kick and the ground and pound in the second round. Cachero, Sabatini as well. So I do like Jamall Emmers in this one. I think the takedown defense will prove out. I like the cardio to both men. The leg kick could be a giant difference maker for Jenkins. I just think the activity of Emmers could be a little bit of a difference maker.
I was really impressed by Emmers' last time out. He was coming off a really difficult loss, and like you said, the injuries at his age, you kind of worry about it, right? Like, he's going to be turning 34 not that long from now. But I do favor him in this matchup ever so slightly. I do think the power shots are going to be able to keep Jack Jenkins off of him. But I will say this, if Jenkins is able to get on the inside, I think he will have a lot of success. He's a guy who's similar to Justin Gaethje, and I'm not comparing them as fighters, but they can throw that leg kick from a really close distance. They don't need a ton of range. They don't need to lead into it. They can throw it from their boxing stance, so I do think, like you said, that'll be a really big key to this matchup.
You see that big-time 6-inch reach advantage for Emmers. You also see the fact that he's got a 3-inch height advantage. We'll see how that plays out in this matchup, because Jenks is one of those guys that can cut that distance like a knife. And then he gets out on the back and retreat and doesn't tend to take a lot of punishment. Love this fight. Both of us going with pretty boy Jamall Emmers. Matt, some big-time fights on this card, including Trevor Peak taking on Chepe Mariscal next. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say.
Let's get into it.